The November wind screamed through the broken windows of the abandoned church like a warning from heaven itself, and Juliana Garrett pressed herself deeper into the moth-eaten pew, wishing she could disappear into the rotting wood. Her stomach had stopped growling 2 days ago, which she knew meant something terrible, and the cold had settled so deep into her bones that she wondered if spring would ever warm her again. She was 22 years old and dying in Utah Territory, 1,800 miles from the Philadelphia home that had cast her out 6 months earlier, when her father discovered she had been meeting secretly with the stable boy, not to run away with him as her father assumed, but to teach him to raid. The misunderstanding had cost her everything, and pride had kept her from explaining. Pride that seemed foolish now as she shivered in this decaying sanctuary 3 miles outside Salt Lake City in the year 1878. The door creaked open with such force that Juliana's eyes snapped wide despite her exhaustion. A man stood silhouetted against the dying light of dusk, tall and broad-shouldered, and for a moment her heart seized with fear. She had learned in her months traveling west that men on the frontier could be salvation or damnation, and there was often no way to tell which until it was too late. Anyone in here? The voice was deep but gentle, carrying a warmth that seemed impossible in the frigid air. Saw smoke from a fire a few days back, figured someone might be sheltering. Juliana tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, too tight with cold and hunger. She managed only a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper, and immediately hated herself for the weakness in it. The man moved quickly toward her, his boots echoing on the warped floorboards. As he drew closer, she could make out his features in the gloom. A strong jaw covered with several days of dark stubble, eyes that looked almost black in the shadows, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He wore a heavy coat and a hat that had seen better days, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to handle trouble. "Madam, you are frozen half to death." He knelt beside the pew, and she could see concern etched deep in his face. "How long have you been here without food or proper warmth?" "3 days," she managed to whisper. "Maybe 4. I lost track." His jaw tightened, and something flashed in his eyes that might have been anger, though she sensed it was not directed at her. "God would want you warm and fed," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not left to freeze in his house while good people walk by. Can you stand?" "I do not know," Juliana admitted. The honesty felt strange after so many months of pretending to be stronger than she was, of lying about her circumstances to avoid pity or worse. Without another word, the man slipped one arm beneath her knees and another around her shoulders, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. She was too weak to protest, too cold to care about propriety. He smelled of leather and wood smoke and horses, scents that reminded her of a world where people lived rather than merely survived. "My name is Flynn Quentin," he said as he carried her toward the door. "I have a ranch about 2 miles south of here. Nothing fancy, but it has a stove that works and food in the pantry. I am going to take you there and get you sorted out if that sits all right with you." "Why?" The question emerged before she could stop it. "Why would you help me?" "You do not know anything about me." Flynn paused at the threshold, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch despite her exhaustion. "Because everyone deserves kindness, madam, and because I remember what it feels like to have nowhere to go and no one who gives a damn whether you live or die. Besides, it is nearly Thanksgiving. Seems a poor way to give thanks for blessings if a man just walks past someone in need." Juliana felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she had built to protect herself during the long months of traveling and struggling and going to bed hungry more nights than not. Tears burned in her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. She had not cried when her father threw her out, had not cried when her money ran out in Ohio, had not cried when the wagon train left her behind in Wyoming after she fell ill with fever and slowed them down. She would not cry now, but Flynn saw the tears anyway, and his expression softened. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You are safe now. I give you my word on that." His horse was tied to a scraggly tree beside the church, a large buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Flynn settled Juliana onto the saddle with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her, wrapping his coat around them both before she could protest. "You need the warmth more than I do," he said when she tried to push the coat back toward him. "I have been out in worse than this with nothing but a shirt. Hush now and let someone take care of you for a change." The ride to his ranch passed in a blur of sensation. The solid warmth of Flynn's body behind her, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait, the way his arm tightened around her waist when she swayed with dizziness. She caught glimpses of the landscape around them, the vast emptiness of Utah territory stretching endlessly under a sky that was turning from gray to deep purple as night approached. Mountains rose in the distance like ancient sentinels, their peaks already white with early snow. Flynn's ranch appeared as a collection of dark shapes against the darkening horizon. A house that was larger than she expected, a barn, several outbuildings. He guided the horse directly to the house, dismounting with easy grace before reaching up to lift her down. "I have a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week," he explained as he carried her up the porch steps. "But this is her day off, so you will have to tolerate just me for the evening. I promise I am reasonably civilized despite appearances." The interior of the house was warm and smelled of bread and coffee, scent so wonderful that Juliana's stomach cramped with sudden, painful hunger. Flynn set her carefully on a chair near the stove, then moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, stoking the fire and setting a kettle to boil. "First, tea," he said. "Something warm in your belly before we try solid food. You have been without for too long to rush things." Juliana watched him work, trying to reconcile this gentle, capable man with the rough cowboys she had encountered on her journey west. Flynn moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin, at home in his own space. He was older than her, she thought, perhaps close to 30, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. "You should know my name," she said, her voice still rough but growing stronger in the warmth. "Since you have been kind enough to rescue me, I am Juliana Garrett." "Miss Garrett," Flynn acknowledged with a small nod. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, though I wish the circumstances were better. How did you end up alone in that church?" The question was asked gently, without judgment, but Juliana still felt the old shame rise in her throat. She had told her story so many times, or at least the version of it she allowed strangers to hear, that it should have come easily. Instead, she found herself wanting to tell him the truth. "I left Philadelphia 6 months ago," she began slowly. "My father and I had a disagreement. I thought I could make my own way west, find work somewhere, start fresh. I had some money saved and I was not afraid of hard work. But I did not understand how hard it would be, how expensive, how many people would take advantage of someone traveling alone." Flynn poured steaming tea into a tin cup and brought it to her, his expression unreadable. "Your father let you go, knowing you would be traveling alone. He thought I needed to learn a lesson," Juliana said, the bitterness creeping into her voice despite her best efforts. "About pride and disobedience and knowing my place. I suppose I have learned quite thoroughly." "Sounds to me like he is the one who needs to learn some lessons," Flynn said, his tone sharp. "About what it means to be a father and protect your children, not cast them out to face God knows what dangers. Drink that slow now." small sips. The tea was hot and sweet, and Juliana felt its warmth spreading through her chest like a benediction. She wrapped her frozen fingers around the cup, savoring the simple pleasure of holding something warm. Flynn busied himself at the stove, and soon wonderful smells filled the kitchen. Onions frying in butter, bread warming, something savory bubbling in a pot. Juliana felt light-headed with hunger and anticipation, but she followed his instructions and sipped her tea slowly, letting her body adjust to having something in her stomach again. "I am heating up some stew," Flynn said, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon. "Nothing fancy, just beef and vegetables, but it will stick to your ribs. You can have a small bowl tonight and more in the morning if you keep it down. I have also drawn you a bath. The water should be warm by now. You can clean up and I will find you some proper clothes. I have a sister who visits sometimes, leaves things here. You are about her size, I think." Tears threatened again, and this time Juliana could not stop them. They spilled down her cheeks silently, born from exhaustion and relief and the overwhelming strangeness of being cared for by this man who owed her nothing. Flynn noticed immediately. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair, his eyes level with hers. "Hey now, none of that. You have been through something terrible, but it is over now. You are safe here, Miss Garrett. I will not let anything happen to you, and I will not turn you out come morning. You have my word on that too." "I do not understand why you are being so kind," Juliana whispered. "Men have not been kind to me on this journey. They have seen me as something to use or ignore or take advantage of. Why are you different?" Flynn was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "My mother died when I was 15, he said finally. "My father could not handle his grief, took to drinking, lost our farm in Missouri. I headed west with nothing but what I could carry, worked any job I could find, slept rough more nights than I care to remember. When I was 17, I got sick, real sick, somewhere in Kansas. I thought I was going to die under a tree by the side of the road. But a family stopped, a man and his wife and their 3 daughters. They took me in, nursed me back to health, fed me, clothed me, asked for nothing in return. When I was well enough to travel, the man gave me $50 and told me to pay it forward someday. He said that is how we make the world better, by helping each other when we can." He stood, his expression still serious. "That was 13 years ago. I have built a good life here, a successful ranch. I have more than I need. So when I see someone in trouble, someone who needs help, I remember that family in Kansas and I try to do what they did for me. I try to be the kind of man they believed I could be." Juliana understood then, at least partly, what drove this quiet cowboy to rescue strangers. She understood, too, that his kindness was not a trap or a deception, but something genuine and rare. The realization made her feel safer than she had in months. The bath was heaven. Flynn had set up a large copper tub in a small room off the kitchen, filled it with water that was warm enough to soothe her aching muscles without being too hot for her cold, shocked body. He had left soap and towels, and a simple dress of soft blue cotton that had belonged to his sister. Juliana washed away 6 months of dust and fear and hardship, scrubbing until her skin was pink and clean, and her hair squeaked between her fingers. When she emerged, dressed in the borrowed clothes with her wet hair braided loosely over one shoulder, Flynn had the table set with a bowl of stew, fresh bread, butter, and more tea. He gestured for her to sit, then took a chair across from her, his own bowl in front of him. "Eat slow," he reminded her. "Your stomach needs time to adjust." The stew was the most delicious thing Juliana had ever tasted, rich and savory, the beef so tender it fell apart at the touch of her spoon. She forced herself to eat slowly despite the gnawing hunger, to savor each bite rather than wolfing it down. Flynn ate his own meal in companionable silence, not pressing her with questions or making her feel obligated to fill the quiet with conversation. When she had finished half the bowl, Juliana set down her spoon, her stomach pleasantly full for the first time in what felt like forever. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate but heartfelt. "Thank you for everything." "You are welcome," Flynn replied simply. "Now, I have a spare room upstairs, second door on the right. The bed is made up with clean sheets and plenty of blankets. I want you to sleep as long as your body needs to sleep. Tomorrow we can talk about what comes next, but tonight you just rest and recover. Is that agreeable?" "Very agreeable," Juliana said. She was so tired that even keeping her eyes open felt like an enormous effort. "But I should tell you I have no money. I cannot pay you for your hospitality, at least not right away, but I can work. I am educated, I can read and write and do figures. I can cook and clean and sew. I can help on the ranch if you will teach me what needs doing. I am not asking for charity, Mr. Quentin. I just need a chance to earn my way." Something flickered across Flynn's face, an emotion Juliana could not quite identify. "We will work something out," he said. "But that is a conversation for tomorrow. Go on now, get some sleep." The bed in the spare room was soft and clean, and Juliana was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. She slept deeply and dreamlessly, the sleep of someone who had finally found a safe harbor after a long and dangerous voyage. When she woke, pale morning sunlight was streaming through the window, and the smell of coffee and bacon was drifting up from downstairs. For a moment she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Then the memories of the previous night came flooding back. The church, Flynn finding her, his kindness, the warm meal, the safe bed. Juliana rose slowly, testing her body's responses. She was still weak, still bone-tired, but the desperate edge of exhaustion had been blunted by sleep and food. She found a brush on the dresser and worked through her hair until it fell in smooth waves past her shoulders, then braided it again and made her way downstairs. Flynn was in the kitchen, standing at the stove in his shirt sleeves, his dark hair still damp from washing. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and his face broke into a smile that transformed his features, making him seem younger and less guarded. "Good morning, Miss Garrett." "You are looking considerably better than yesterday. How are you feeling?" "Better," she admitted. "Weak still, but better. Thank you again for everything you have done." "Sit," Flynn gestured to the table. "I have made breakfast. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, gravy. My housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, taught me to cook when I first hired her. She said any man running his own household should know his way around a kitchen. She was right about that." The food was hearty and delicious, and Juliana ate with better appetite this morning, her stomach more prepared to handle a proper meal. Flynn sat across from her with his own plate, and she noticed he was watching her with an expression that seemed equal parts concern and something else, something she could not quite name. "I want to talk about your situation," Flynn said when they had both finished eating. "If you are comfortable with that." "Of course." Juliana set down her fork and met his gaze directly. "I meant what I said last night about working to earn my keep. I will not be a burden." "That is not what concerns me," Flynn said carefully. "What concerns me is that you have no protection out here, no family, no resources. You have been through something terrible, and you need time to recover and figure out your next steps. So here is what I propose. You stay here as my housekeeper. Mrs. Patterson is getting on in years, and she has been hinting that the trip from town 3 times a week is wearing on her. If you took over her duties, lived here permanently, I would pay you a fair wage plus room and board. You would have your own space, your independence, and time to decide what you want to do with your future. Does that sound acceptable? Juliana stared at him, stunned by the generosity of the offer. Mr. Quentin, that is incredibly kind, but what will people say? A single woman living alone on a ranch with a single man. I do not want to damage your reputation. Flynn leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. I will not pretend that some people will not talk, but Mrs. Patterson will still come weekly to help with the heavy work and to keep things proper in the eyes of the town. Besides, I am more concerned with doing what is right than with what people might say. You need help, I can provide it, and in return I get a housekeeper who is reliable and educated. Seems like a fair arrangement to me. It is more than fair, Juliana said, her voice thick with emotion. It is generous beyond measure, but I have to ask, why? Why are you doing this for me? Flynn was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. Because when I found you in that church yesterday, looking so small and cold and alone, something in me just broke open. I know what it is like to be lost and desperate, Miss Garrett. I know what it is like to think you are not going to make it another day. And I know what it means when someone reaches out a hand and pulls you back from the edge. That family in Kansas saved my life, not just because they nursed me through sickness, but because they showed me that goodness still exists in the world. They gave me hope when I had none left. I want to do that for you. Tears spilled down Juliana's cheeks, and this time she made no effort to hide them. I accept your offer, she whispered. Thank you, Mr. Quentin. Thank you for giving me a chance. Flynn, he corrected gently. If we are going to be living under the same roof, you should call me Flynn. Only if you call me Juliana. Juliana it is. His smile was warm and genuine, and it made something flutter in her chest, something she had not felt in so long she had almost forgotten what it was like. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Juliana proved to be an excellent housekeeper, keeping the ranch house clean and organized, cooking meals that made Flynn praise her skills with genuine enthusiasm. She was quick to learn the routines of ranch life, understanding when Flynn needed to be up before dawn to tend to the cattle, when he would return exhausted and needing a hot meal, when he needed quiet and when he was in the mood to talk. Mrs. Patterson visited on Wednesdays, a stout, gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a kind heart. She approved of Juliana immediately, declaring her a sensible girl with good manners and a proper work ethic. Her presence did much to silence any potential gossip about the arrangement, and she took Juliana under her wing, teaching her the particular quirks of Flynn's household and the best ways to manage the supplies and provisions. As the weeks passed and November gave way to December, Juliana found herself growing stronger not just in body but in spirit. The constant fear and anxiety that had haunted her journey west began to fade, replaced by a cautious sense of security. Flynn was unfailingly kind and respectful, maintaining proper boundaries while still being warm and friendly. They fell into easy conversations over meals, talking about everything from books to politics to their dreams for the future. Juliana learned that Flynn had built his ranch from nothing, working for years as a hired hand before saving enough to buy his own land. He had a gift with horses, breeding and training them with patience and skill that had earned him a reputation throughout the territory. He loved the land with a fierceness that showed in the way he spoke about it, the way his eyes lit up when he described his plans for expanding the herd or improving the pastures. In turn, Juliana told him about her life in Philadelphia, about growing up in a household that valued education and culture, but also rigid social rules. She told him about her mother, who had died when Juliana was 16, and how her father had become harder and colder in his grief. She even told him, haltingly, about the misunderstanding with the stable boy, about how she had only been trying to help someone less fortunate learn to read, but her father had seen it as a betrayal of her class and station. "That is a damn fool reason to cast out your daughter," Flynn said, his voice rough with anger on her behalf. "Pardon my language, but teaching someone to read is a kindness, not a sin. Your father should have been proud of you, not ashamed." "He believed I was being inappropriate," Juliana said quietly. "Meeting secretly with a servant. He thought there was something improper between us, and nothing I said could convince him otherwise. He said I had shamed the family and needed to learn consequences. So he gave me $300 and told me to make my own way in the world. He said if I could survive on my own for a year, he would consider allowing me to return." "And would you want to return?" Flynn asked. "If he offered," Juliana considered the question carefully. A month ago, she would have said yes without hesitation, would have leaped at the chance to return to the security and comfort of her old life. But now, sitting in Flynn's warm kitchen with the smell of bread baking and the sound of winter wind howling outside, she was not so sure. "I do not know," she admitted. "I am not the same person who left Philadelphia. I have seen things, experienced things, learned things about myself that I never would have discovered if I had stayed. I cannot imagine going back to that life, to those rules and restrictions. But I also cannot imagine what comes next, what I want my life to look like." Flynn nodded slowly, his dark eyes thoughtful. "You do not have to decide right now. You have time to figure it out, time to heal and grow and discover who you want to be. That is the gift of starting over out here. You get to choose your own path." As December deepened and Christmas approached, something shifted between them. The easy friendship they had built began to feel charged with an undercurrent of tension, a awareness of each other that went beyond mere companionship. Juliana caught herself watching Flynn as he worked, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the capable way his hands handled tools and animals, the quiet confidence in his movements. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way his voice deepened when he was tired, the way he hummed tunelessly while he worked on paperwork in the evenings. For his part, Flynn seemed increasingly aware of her presence. His eyes would track her movements as she worked around the kitchen, and more than once she caught him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. He found excuses to be near her, to stand close while showing her some aspect of ranch work, to brush against her hand when passing her something at dinner. Neither of them acknowledged what was growing between them, the attraction that was becoming harder to ignore with each passing day. But it was there, humming beneath every conversation, every shared glance, every accidental touch. One evening in mid-December, Flynn came in from the barn covered in snow, his face red with cold and his clothes soaked through. A storm had blown in unexpectedly, and he had been securing the animals and making sure everything was battened down for what promised to be a fierce night. "Good Lord, you are frozen," Juliana exclaimed, rushing to help him out of his wet coat. "Get by the stove and warm up. I will make coffee." "It is a bad one," Flynn said, his teeth chattering as he stripped off his gloves. "I have not seen a storm this fierce in 3 years. We are going to be snowed in for at least a couple days." The storm raged all night and into the next day, piling snow against the windows and howling around the eaves like something alive and angry. Flynn and Juliana stayed close to the fire, watching the blizzard through the windows and marveling at its intensity. "I am glad I found you when I did," Flynn said softly, standing beside her at the window. "If you had still been in that church during this storm, you would not have survived." Juliana shivered at the thought. "God was watching over me," she said. "He sent you to find me." "Or maybe it was just luck," Flynn replied. "Good timing." I do not believe in luck. Juliana turned to face him, suddenly brave in the way the storm made everything feel both more dangerous and more safe. I believe things happen for a reason. I believe I was meant to end up in that church and you were meant to find me there. Why? Flynn's voice was low, intense. What reason could there be for you to suffer like that? Maybe so I could end up here, Juliana said. Maybe so I could meet you. The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Flynn stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face, and Juliana saw the moment his control slipped, saw the careful distance he had been maintaining crumble. "Juliana," he said, his voice rough. "I need you to be sure about what you are saying. Because if you are suggesting what I think you are suggesting, I need you to be certain. I have been fighting what I feel for you since almost the first day you were here, trying to be respectful, trying to give you space to heal and figure out your life. But if you are telling me you feel this too, that you want to see where this could go, then I need to know you mean it." "I mean it," Juliana said, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but Flynn, I feel something for you that I have never felt before. You are kind and strong and honorable, and when I am with you, I feel safe and valued and seen in a way I never felt in Philadelphia. I do not know what the future holds, but I know I want to explore these feelings to see where they lead." Flynn closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that belied his size and strength. "I am going to kiss you now," he said, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. "If that is not what you want, you need to tell me to stop." "Do not stop," Juliana whispered. His lips met hers softly, almost reverently, a kiss that spoke of tenderness and restrained passion. Juliana melted into it, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders as the world seemed to tilt on its axis. She had been kissed before, chased pecks at society parties, but nothing like this. Nothing that made her feel like she was on fire and drowning and flying all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he said, the words simple and honest. "I know it is too soon to say it, but it is the truth. I think I started falling that first night when you looked at me with those green eyes and asked me why I was being kind. You deserved kindness, Juliana. You deserved so much more than what the world had given you, and I wanted to be the one to provide it." "I am falling in love with you too," Juliana admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone. I thought maybe I was not capable of it, that maybe something in me was broken. But you make me feel whole. You make me feel like I could be happy, truly happy, for the first time in my life." They spent the rest of the storm in a state of giddy discovery, talking for hours about their feelings, their fears, their hopes. Flynn told her about the loneliness of building the ranch alone, of going to bed every night in an empty house and wondering if he would spend his whole life that way. Juliana told him about the pressure she had felt in Philadelphia to marry well, to become the perfect society wife, and how suffocating those expectations had been. "I want to marry you," Flynn said on the 3rd day, when the storm had finally blown itself out and weak winter sunlight was filtering through the snow-covered windows. "Not right away, not until you are ready, but someday. I want you to be my wife, Juliana. I want to build a life with you, a family if you want children, a partnership based on respect and love and mutual support. Is that something you could want too?" "Yes," Juliana said without hesitation. "Yes, that is exactly what I want." They waited until spring to marry, wanting to give themselves time to be certain, to let their relationship deepen and grow without the pressure of formal commitments. Mrs. Patterson was delighted when they told her, declaring that she had known from the start they were meant for each other. She helped Juliana prepare for the wedding, teaching her the local customs and helping her sew a simple but beautiful dress of cream-colored linen. They were married in May of 1879, in the little church in Salt Lake City with Mrs. Patterson and a few of Flynn's closest friends in attendance. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when Flynn slipped a gold ring onto Juliana's finger and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of their lives, she felt something settle into place in her soul, a rightness she had never experienced before. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, Flynn showing her with his body what he had already shown her with his words and actions, that she was precious to him, valued, loved beyond measure. Juliana gave herself to him completely, trusting him with her body as she already trusted him with her heart. The first year of marriage was not without challenges. There were adjustments to make, compromises to negotiate, moments of friction as two independent people learned to function as a partnership. But underneath it all was a foundation of love and respect that made even the difficult moments bearable. Juliana proved to have a knack for ranch management, taking over the bookkeeping and supply ordering with an efficiency that freed Flynn to focus on the horses and cattle. She corresponded with buyers and suppliers, negotiated better prices on feed and equipment, and implemented a system of record-keeping that made the business side of the ranch run much more smoothly. "You are brilliant," Flynn told her one evening, reviewing the accounts and marveling at the money she had saved them. "I have been doing this for years and never thought to organize things this way. You have a gift for this, Juliana." "I enjoy it," she admitted. "I like solving problems, finding better ways to do things. And I like knowing that I am contributing to our success, that I am a true partner in this venture." "You are absolutely a partner," Flynn assured her. "This ranch belongs to both of us now, and every decision we make together." As autumn approached and their first anniversary drew near, Juliana began to suspect she might be pregnant. The signs were subtle at first, a certain tenderness in her breasts, a queasiness in the mornings, a bone-deep fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to cure. She waited until she was certain before telling Flynn, wanting to be sure she was not building up his hopes only to dash them. When she finally told him one evening in late October, Flynn's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with joy so pure it took her breath away, and he swept her into his arms with a whoop of excitement that made her laugh despite her nerves. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, as if he could not quite believe it. "Juliana, we are going to be parents." "This is the best news, the absolute best news." "You are happy then?" she asked, suddenly needing the reassurance. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Flynn said, his hands gentle on her still flat belly. "I am overjoyed, I am grateful, I am already in love with this little one." "Thank you, Juliana. Thank you for giving me everything I never dared to hope I could have." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as winter settled in again, Juliana found herself thinking about the church where Flynn had found her just over a year ago. It seemed impossible that so much could have changed in such a short time, that she could have gone from desperate and alone to loved and cherished, from having nothing to having everything that mattered. "You ever think about that day?" she asked Flynn one snowy evening as they sat by the fire, her feet in his lap as he rubbed them gently. "The day you found me, all the time," Flynn admitted. "I think about what would have happened if I had not decided to check that church, if I had gone a different direction or waited another day. I think about how close I came to never meeting you, and it terrifies me." "God would want you warm and fed," Juliana quoted softly, remembering his words from that first night. "That is what you said to me, and you made it happen. You gave me warmth and food and so much more. You gave me a life, Flynn, a real life with meaning and purpose and love. "You gave me the same thing," Flynn said, his dark eyes shining with emotion. "I had the ranch, I had success, but I was lonely, Juliana. I came home to an empty house every night and told myself it was enough, that I did not need anything more, but I was lying to myself. Finding you, loving you, building this life together, it has filled spaces in me I did not even know were empty." Their son was born in June of 1880, arriving after a long but uncomplicated labor that left Juliana exhausted and exhilarated. Flynn was beside himself with joy, cradling the tiny boy in his large hands with a reverence that made Juliana fall in love with him all over again. "What should we name him?" Flynn asked, his voice choked with emotion. "I was thinking James," Juliana said, "after my mother's father. He was the only one in my family who ever really understood me, who encouraged me to think and learn and question. He died when I was 12, but I still miss him." "James Quentin," Flynn tested the name, then smiled. "It is perfect. Welcome to the world, James. Your mother and I are going to do our very best by you." Parenthood transformed them both. Flynn was a devoted father, rising with Juliana for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just watching their son sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. Juliana discovered a fierce protective instinct she had not known she possessed, a determination to give James the childhood she had not had, full of love and acceptance and freedom to be himself. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Flynn's reputation as a horse breeder spread, and buyers came from as far as Denver and San Francisco to purchase his stock. Juliana's management skills kept them profitable even in difficult years, and they were able to expand the operation, buying additional land and hiring more hands. In the summer of 1883, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. Juliana stared at the familiar handwriting on the envelope, her hands shaking slightly as she broke the seal. "It is from my father," she told Flynn that evening. "He says he has been thinking about me, wondering how I am. He asks if I would be willing to write back, to tell him about my life." "What do you want to do?" Flynn asked carefully. Juliana thought about it for a long time, remembering the hurt and anger she had felt when her father cast her out, remembering the fear and desperation of those months traveling west. But she also thought about James, about the kind of person she wanted to be for her son, about the importance of forgiveness and letting go of old grudges. "I want to write back," she said finally. "Not because I need him anymore or because I want his approval, but because I want him to know that I am happy, that I have built a good life without him, and because I want to leave that door open, for James if for no one else. He deserves to know his grandfather if my father can change enough to be worthy of knowing him." She wrote the letter carefully, telling her father about Flynn and the ranch, about James and their life in Utah Territory. She was honest about her happiness, about how the experiences that had seemed so terrible at the time had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. She did not apologize for her choices or beg for his forgiveness. She simply offered him a window into her world and left it up to him whether he wanted to look through it. Her father's response came 3 months later. It was a different letter than she expected, full of remorse and regret. He admitted that he had been wrong to cast her out, that pride and stubbornness had blinded him to the truth of her actions. He told her about his own loneliness since she left, about how empty the house felt without her. He asked if he might visit someday, if she would be willing to introduce him to his grandson. Juliana cried when she read it, not from sadness but from a complicated mix of emotions she could not quite name. Flynn held her and let her cry, understanding that some wounds needed tears to heal properly. "What do you want to do?" he asked again, and this time Juliana knew the answer immediately. "I want to invite him to visit," she said. "Not to forgive and forget, not to go back to the way things were, but to move forward, to see if we can build something new between us. I want James to know his grandfather, and I want my father to see that the life he tried to destroy ended up being better than anything he could have planned for me." Her father came the following spring, a dignified man in his 60s who looked older than Juliana remembered. He was stiff and formal at first, uncomfortable in the rough environment of the ranch, unsure how to bridge the gap between them. But James broke through his reserve, the cheerful 3-year-old chattering away without any sense of the tension between the adults. Watching her father smile at her son, Juliana felt something inside her soften and release. They would never have the relationship they might have had if he had not sent her away, but they found a new equilibrium, a careful respect built on acceptance of each other's choices. Her father returned to Philadelphia after 2 weeks, but he wrote regularly after that, and he came west to visit every year, each visit easier than the last. The years flowed by in a pattern of seasons and growth. James was joined by a sister, Emma, in 1885, and then another son, Thomas, in 1888. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Flynn's horses won awards at shows and fairs, and Juliana's management made them wealthy enough to build a larger house and provide their children with every advantage. But wealth and success were not what defined their lives. What mattered was the love they had built together, the family they had created, the partnership that had started with one act of kindness on a cold November day. Flynn never forgot where they had come from, and he made sure their children understood the importance of helping others, of reaching out a hand to those in need. On their 10th anniversary, Flynn took Juliana back to the old church where he had found her. It had been repaired in recent years, turned into a proper meeting house for the small community that had grown up nearby. They stood in the spot where she had been sleeping that night, and Flynn pulled her close. "You remember what I said to you?" he asked softly. "God would want you warm and fed," Juliana replied, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "I was right," Flynn said. "But I did not know then that God had even bigger plans. He did not just want you warm and fed. He wanted you loved and cherished and happy. He wanted you to have everything your heart desired, and he used me to make it happen. I will be grateful for that every day of my life." "We saved each other," Juliana said, tears streaming down her face. "I was dying in this church, but you were dying too in your own way. Dying of loneliness and emptiness. We both needed saving, and God brought us together so we could do it for each other." They kissed there in the old church, surrounded by memories and gratitude, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate despairs. The years continued their steady march. The children grew, bringing their own joys and challenges. James proved to have his father's gift with horses, while Emma showed her mother's head for business. Thomas was the scholar of the family, always with his nose in a book, dreaming of becoming a lawyer someday. Flynn and Juliana grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, sick livestock and difficult markets, but nothing could shake the foundation they had built together. They had learned early that partnership meant facing troubles together, celebrating victories together, and never letting pride or stubbornness drive wedges between them. When Utah became a state in 1896, they celebrated with the entire territory, proud to be part of the young nation's growth. Their ranch had become an institution by then, known throughout the region not just for quality horses but for fair dealing and honest work. Flynn had trained a generation of cowboys, teaching them not just the skills of ranch work, but the values of integrity and compassion. Juliana had become a leader in the community as well, helping to establish a school and a library, serving on committees that worked to improve conditions for everyone in the region. She never forgot how close she had come to dying alone and forgotten, and she made it her mission to ensure that no one in her community would face that fate if she could prevent it. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought friends and neighbors from miles around. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and more food than Juliana had seen in one place since her days in Philadelphia. But the moment she treasured most came at the end of the evening, when she and Flynn stood alone on the porch of their house, watching the stars emerge in the vast Utah sky. 20 years, Flynn said, his arm around her waist. 20 years since I walked into that church and found the other half of my soul. 20 years since you told me God would want me warm and fed, Juliana replied, leaning into his embrace, and then spent the rest of your life proving it every single day. I love you, Juliana Quentin, Flynn said, turning her to face him. I loved you the day I found you, I loved you the day I married you, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond if such things are possible. I love you too, Juliana said, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Flynn. You gave me everything, a home, a family, a purpose, but most of all you gave me yourself, and that has been more than enough. As the new century approached, bringing changes and challenges they could not have imagined in their younger years, Flynn and Juliana faced it together, secure in the knowledge that whatever came, they would handle it as they had handled everything else, with love, with partnership, with the unshakable bond they had forged in the crucible of hardship and kindness. Their grandchildren began to arrive in the early years of the new century, James and his wife bringing them a grandson in 1902, followed by Emma presenting them with twin granddaughters in 1904. Thomas, true to his scholarly ambitions, went east for law school but wrote often, promising to return to Utah to practice once his education was complete. Flynn and Juliana settled into the role of grandparents with the same devotion they had brought to parenthood, delighting in the opportunity to spoil the little ones and then send them home to their parents at the end of the day. They took the grandchildren on rides around the ranch, teaching them to respect the land and animals, passing on the values that had guided their own lives. I sometimes think about the girl I was, Juliana said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their grandson chase fireflies across the yard. The girl who left Philadelphia thinking she knew what life was about, who thought pride and independence were the same thing. She was so young, so foolish, so unprepared for what the world had waiting for her. She was brave, Flynn corrected gently. Maybe too proud, maybe naive, but brave. It takes courage to strike out on your own, to refuse to accept a life that feels wrong even when it is safe and comfortable. That girl survived months of hardship that would have broken most people. She made it to that church, and she held on long enough for me to find her. That is not foolishness, Juliana. That is strength. I would not have made it without you, Juliana said. One more day, maybe two, and I would have frozen to death or simply given up. You saved my life, Flynn. And you saved mine, Flynn replied. You filled the empty spaces, gave me purpose beyond just building a successful ranch. You gave me a reason to come home every night, a reason to plan for the future, a reason to be the best man I could be. We saved each other, love. That is what makes it perfect. As they entered their 60s, both Flynn and Juliana remained active and engaged with the ranch and community. Flynn still worked with the horses, though he left the harder physical labor to younger men. Juliana still managed the books and correspondence, her mind as sharp as ever. They had trained the next generation well, and James had taken over most of the day-to-day operations, allowing his parents to step back and enjoy the fruits of their labor. They traveled some in those years, taking trips to San Francisco and Denver, once even venturing east to visit Thomas in New York. But they always returned to the ranch with relief, confirming what they had always known. That home was not just a place but a feeling, and their hearts belonged to the land they had built their lives upon. On a crisp November evening in 1908, exactly 30 years after the night Flynn found Juliana in the church, they made a pilgrimage back to that spot. The church was still there, still serving the community, though it had been renovated and expanded over the years. They sat in the same pew where Juliana had been sleeping that night, holding hands and remembering. 30 years, Juliana marveled. 3 children, 5 grandchildren, a lifetime of memories. And it all started right here, with you deciding to check an abandoned church on a cold night. Best decision I ever made, Flynn said. Every good thing in my life traces back to that moment. Everything I am, everything I have, everything I love, it all started when I opened that door and saw you huddled in this pew. God would want you warm and fed. Juliana repeated the words that had changed her life. Such simple words, but they contained everything. Compassion, faith, humanity. You saw someone in need and you helped without asking questions or demanding explanations or expecting anything in return. That is who you are, Flynn. That is who you have always been. I learned it from you too, Flynn said. Watching the way you treat people, the way you lead with kindness and assume the best until proven otherwise. You make me want to be better, Juliana. You always have. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, wrapped in each other's arms. 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most and built something beautiful from that first act of kindness. The church was warm now, well-maintained and welcoming, but Juliana could still remember the cold that had seeped into her bones that night, the despair that had threatened to overwhelm her. And she could remember the moment the door opened and Flynn stepped in, bringing hope with him. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to Flynn or to God or to the universe itself. "Thank you for that night, for this life, for every moment of joy and struggle and growth. Thank you for leading me to this place, to this man, to this beautiful existence I never could have imagined." Flynn kissed her temple, his lips warm against her skin. "I am the one who should be thankful," he said. "You took a lonely cowboy and made him into a husband, a father, a grandfather. You took a house and made it a home. You took a good life and made it an extraordinary one. I am grateful every single day that I walked through that door 30 years ago." They left the church as the sun was setting, painting the Utah sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. They rode home together on Flynn's horse, just as they had that first night, and Juliana leaned back against her husband's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the solid strength of his arms around her. The ranch came into view as darkness fell, lights glowing warmly in the windows, smoke rising from the chimney. It was a sight that never failed to move her, this physical manifestation of everything they had built together. Inside that house were memories and love, laughter and tears, the full spectrum of human experience shared between 2 people who had committed their lives to each other. Their children and grandchildren were waiting when they arrived, having gathered for a surprise anniversary celebration. There was dinner and cake, stories and laughter, the warm chaos of family surrounding them like a blanket. James stood to make a toast, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke about his parents' love and devotion, about the example they had set for all of them. "You taught us that real love is not just feeling, it is action," James said, raising his glass. It is choosing each other every single day through good times and bad. It is kindness and patience and forgiveness. It is working together to build something greater than either of you could build alone. You two have shown us what marriage should look like, what partnership means, what it takes to create a lasting legacy. We love you both more than words can express. Juliana looked around the table at the faces of the people she loved most in the world. People who existed because Flynn had decided to check an old church on a cold November night. Her children and grandchildren, each one a blessing beyond measure, each one a testament to the power of that first act of kindness. "I want to say something," she said, standing up on legs that were not as steady as they once were but still strong enough to carry her through whatever years remained. 30 years ago tonight, I was dying. I had given up hope, stopped believing that life would ever get better. And then your father walked through a door and said, 'God would want you warm and fed.' Such simple words, but they changed everything. He gave me food and warmth, yes, but he also gave me hope. He gave me a reason to keep going, to believe that maybe I deserved good things, that maybe my story was not over yet. And then he gave me love, the kind of love I had only read about in books, the kind I never thought I would find for myself. Everything good in my life, every single blessing I count, exists because of that moment. Because your father is the kind of man who stops to help a stranger, who leads with compassion, who sees someone in need and does something about it. I am grateful beyond words for the life we have built together, and I am grateful to all of you for being part of it." Flynn stood and wrapped his arms around her, and their family surrounded them, 3 generations united in love and gratitude. It was a perfect moment, the kind that deserves to be held and treasured, remembered and passed down through the years. The years that followed were gentle ones. Flynn and Juliana grew old together with grace, their bodies slowing but their love remaining as strong as ever. They spent their days on the porch of their home, watching the sun rise and set over land they had helped civilize, land that would pass to their children and grandchildren, and beyond. Thomas returned from New York with a wife and young son, setting up a law practice in Salt Lake City, but visiting the ranch often. Emma's daughters grew into capable young women, one following her grandmother's path into ranch management, the other discovering a talent for teaching. James's son showed every sign of inheriting his grandfather's gift with horses, spending every free moment in the barn learning the family trade. On a warm summer evening in 1918, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, Flynn and Juliana sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Flynn's hand found Juliana's, their fingers intertwining with the ease of 4 decades of practice. "You remember that night?" Flynn asked, though he knew she did. They had revisited that memory countless times over the years, never tiring of it, always finding something new to marvel at in how their lives had unfolded from that single moment. "I remember everything," Juliana said. "The cold, the fear, the certainty that I was going to die alone and forgotten. And then I remember the sound of the door opening and your voice and the way you looked at me with such kindness. I remember thinking that maybe angels were real after all, that maybe God had sent one to save me." "I was no angel," Flynn said with a soft laugh. "Just a man doing what felt right." "That is what made you perfect," Juliana replied. "You did not help me because you were a saint or because you wanted something in return. You helped me because you saw someone in need and you had the means to do something about it. That is humanity at its best, Flynn. That is what we should all aspire to be." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Flynn pulled Juliana closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the gentle rhythm of her breathing. They had lived a lifetime together, and if they were blessed, they would have a few more years yet. But however long or short the time remaining, Flynn knew it would be enough. Because they had already had more than most people ever dreamed of, more than either of them had believed possible on that cold November night 40 years ago. "I love you," he whispered into the gathering darkness. "I love you too," Juliana replied. "Always have, always will." And in the warm embrace of the summer evening, surrounded by the land they loved and the legacy they had built, Flynn and Juliana Quentin held each other close and gave thanks for the journey that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them through all the years since. Their story, born from desperation and kindness, had become a testament to the power of compassion, the miracle of second chances, and the enduring strength of true love. The ranch continued to thrive under James's leadership, becoming even more successful as the 20th century progressed. But the real legacy Flynn and Juliana left was not measured in acres or dollars. It was measured in the values they had instilled in their children and grandchildren, in the kindness they had shown to countless people over the years, in the love they had demonstrated every single day of their marriage. When Flynn passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1922, at the age of 73, Juliana grieved deeply, but without bitterness. They had been given 44 years together, years filled with more love and joy than most people experienced in a lifetime. She held his hand as he took his last breath, and she whispered the words he had spoken to her so long ago. "God would want you warm and fed." And then she added, "and loved, always loved." Juliana lived 4 more years, spending them surrounded by family, sharing stories about Flynn, making sure her grandchildren and great-grandchildren understood the remarkable man he had been. She told them about the night he found her in the church, about how he had saved her life with his kindness, about how their love had grown from that single act of compassion into something that had shaped multiple generations. When her time came in the spring of 1926, Juliana went peacefully, her hand held by James, her last words a whisper of Flynn's name. She was buried beside him on the ranch they had built together, under the vast Utah sky they had both loved so much. Their story became legend in the family, passed down through the generations as an example of what love should look like, of what it means to see someone in need and reach out a helping hand. The church where Flynn found Juliana still stood, and their descendants made pilgrimages there every year on the anniversary of that fateful night, remembering and giving thanks for the chance meeting that had changed everything. Because in the end, that is what their story was about. The transformative power of kindness, the redemption available to those who have lost their way, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are really just the beginning of something wonderful. Flynn and Juliana had found each other when they both needed saving, and in saving each other, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love that would echo through the generations. A reminder that compassion and courage can change not just individual lives but entire families, entire communities, entire worlds. Their love story began with 5 simple words spoken in a cold church on a November night. God would want you warm and fed. But those words contained multitudes, and from them grew a lifetime of devotion, partnership, and enduring love that proved, beyond any doubt, that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places, and that true love really can conquer all.